What? Who was that? Who was that?
That was Glenn Frey.
Glenn Frey? Was that Glenn Frey? God damn.
Yeah.
You know, sometimes you think that genius doesn't exist in modern times. And then you realize that Glenn Frey wrote The Heat Is On and Smuggler's Blues within, a couple years of one another.
Welcome to Backtracking, the show where two old friends revisit influential bands' catalogs track by track. My name is J. William Hall.
And I'm Dan Fiden. We're taking this journey together, providing context, both personal and historical, on some legendary bands. For our second season, we picked none other than American Music Club. J. William Hall, we are back. How was the week?
You know, the weeks seem so long.
Yeah.
Do you remember the song from the 70s? I believe it's probably of the yacht rock milieu. Yeah,
Yeah.
It says,
which?
I didn't know it could be so strong, waiting and wondering about you. Do you know what I'm talking about?
No, I don't.
Forever without you. You don't remember that song? Nights
No.
Are Forever Without You.
Nights Are Forever Without You?
Anyways,
I don't remember that one.
The point I'm trying to make is the weeks are forever without backtracking.
Yeah.
Hey.
That is absolutely true, and that sentiment is clearly shared by all of the listeners that we have. We are sweeping the charts, J. William. We are rocketing to the top of the charts.
With a bullet.
We are number one in the worldwide podcast charts of American Music Club podcasts. Number one.
That's
and
incredible.
There's no one else even close. It is amazing.
Well,
and it's
listen, I have a few people I want to thank.
okay. Go ahead.
Nah, I'm not gonna do that.
Yeah, because there's nobody to thank. You've only got one person to thank for this, and that's yourself.
That's right. I pulled myself up by my bootstraps.
Yeah. Yeah.
A poor sharecropper's son from flyover country. And
yeah,
now
that's right. I now look at you. You are the host of one of the most beloved podcasts in history, actually, which I think is terrific.
Listen. In all seriousness, I do have one person to thank.
Yeah, who's that?
It's you, Dan.
What about Mark Eitzel? I thought that was going to be Mark Eitzel.
Oh, well, yeah.
Although,
yeah, you know what? I am going to thank Mark Eitzel as well. So two.
I'd like to thank two people. We could thank Eitzel, although he has really, not participated in a meaningful way in the podcast. And maybe now is the time for us to really address that head on.
Dan, I can't go with you on this journey because I disagree when you say he has not participated in a meaningful way. Of course he's participated in a meaningful way. He is the primary songwriter, songsmith of this whole podcast, this whole season of the podcast.
Yeah, I mean, in the same way that we could thank the, inventor of the English language, because that's the language we use. But if we were doing a podcast about William Shakespeare, yes,
but he didn't personally come on the podcast, would we hold it against him? Would we say, he didn't really do much? Like, I'm not gonna, he doesn't deserve thanks.
He did. Yeah, no, he didn't do anything extra. I mean, listen, he whether the podcast happened or not, he put in the same amount of work. And that's the same thing I'm going to say with Eitzel, the work was already done. We just showed up. He didn't chip in.
Well, listen, there's room for disagreement on the American Music Club podcast. Hey, just like there's room for disagreement here in America. Am I right?
That's absolutely true.
I'm putting forth a call for unity.
Yes, I like that.
We're talking about a very patriotic
Yeah.
collection of songs here. Lover's Leap, USA,
That is right. That is right. That is right.
American.
Yes.
You know, one thing that we didn't talk about last
Okay.
episode that I wanted to talk about was the title of the album. We didn't really
Yeah.
talk about, like, how do you feel about this title? Like, what does it say to you?
I love this title. Actually, I like the title. I'm going to reveal it right now. I like the title of the album better than I like the album. I'm going to say it right there.
Well, is it fair to call it an album? It's a collection, right?
It's a collection. It's an oddity. It's an oddity. And I like the title of it. I love the title of Mark Eitzel's Super Hits International, which is also another kind of oddities collection that I think it's just a really funny, catchy. Here's what I would say. Lover's Leap USA, Mark Eitzel Super Hits International, and the name of the band, American Music Club, I think all fit within the same category. A somewhat self-effacing, kind of a subtly sarcastic name. Will you go with me on that journey, or do you disagree?
Well, yes and no. It's like, on the one hand, you know, I do think that he's, you know, one of the overarching themes of his songs, whether intentional or not, just by virtue of living in America, of being an American, of writing about the things that he sees around him. He's writing about America. He's revealing glimpses into parts of America that most Americans don't know about, probably, you know? And so it's like, you know, I do see where there was a little bit of tongue in cheek in calling the band American Music Club, but there is something distinctly American about the DNA of the band, of the sound of the band, you know?
Yeah.
And so I think it works on multiple levels in that way. You know, for me, like, I really like this title as well. And just, you know, Lover's Leap, it's like, it conjures a whole, setting for me. You know, it's like, it's sort of this classic, almost like 1950s, like trope of, like, you know, a teenage hideaway getaway where you go to neck with your girlfriend or boyfriend, and it's on the edge of a cliff overlooking like Hollywood or something like that, you know? And you know, and so I just think it's a great title for like an odds and sods kind of collection where it's like you're taking a leap of faith. It's sort of like another way of, you know, saying that. And, you know, I think it's cool.
Yeah.
I just wanted to say that. I wanted to talk about the title.
I would agree with that. I think that there's an interesting pattern in the Eitzel and American Music Club album titles. I think that there is the kind of one category of the album titles that I think are kind of cheeky, right? Mm-hmm. Lover's Leap USA, Super Hits International, Love Songs for Patriots. There's a few, right? Mm-hmm. And then there's this other category of album titles that I personally just think are amazingly perfect, like Everclear, like Mercury, right? Like California. Engine. I love those titles. Very simple, somehow evocative, but just simple and like kind of straight to the point. And I guess I've always found it a little strange that those two types of titles sit next to one another in the same catalog. Do you disagree?
No, I don't disagree. I'm thinking about what you've brought up here. You know, I think that the titles of the album, you know, is of course Eitzel is, you know, famous for the darkness of his lyrics, but also for the humor that is interwoven. And you know, the title of an album or a collection is another way to sort of make like a humorous wink wink kind of thing. And you know, and I think like Caught in a Trap, you know, that's clearly like a more humorous kind of and I don't know if he thinks about it all that hard about, when you're giving a title, an album title, does it have to be something that you feel like somehow fits that group of songs, or is it completely disconnected and you just like, I don't know. You're just grabbing at something, but I don't feel like he's grabbing at something. I think he thinks these things through, whether humorous or whether more evocative. AMC and Mark Eitzel's album title game is strong.
I would agree. I would agree with that. I would agree with that. I tend to like uniformity in approach over the course of a catalog, right? My ideal band that probably doesn't exist would have consistent typography of their band name on every album from their debut through their final album. It would be the same kind of logo type or whatever for the band. The album titles would all feel a piece, right? They'd all feel kind of similar, and the album covers would all feel the same.
So you want you want it to feel like a box set that is just released like one piece at a time, but it all goes together as like a box.
Yes.
That would be very cool. I don't know of any bands offhand that have achieved quite that level of uniformity or whatever across a catalog, but one band that comes close, at least with the typography from this era, Idaho, I think by the second album, they had like found the font, and that became like...
I'm gonna say Idaho is okay. I'm gonna one up you though. One that got closer, although I've got some quibbles. Very similar band, very similar era, related to AMC. Red House Painters. Red House Painters.
Yes.
Until they got to songs from a blue guitar or songs of a blue guitar, the album covers all beautiful. They all feel very similar somehow. The band name typography is all very consistent. The only issue that I would have with that stretch of albums is there is some weird inconsistency in that they have two self-titled albums, which Peter Gabriel did it in the beginning of his career, but I'm not like, you either do that and you never name an album, or you name the albums. That's my opinion.
Yeah, it feels like the artists that have tried to do that, where it's like every album's just going to be self-titled,
Yeah.
They give up at some point. At
Yes,
some point
exactly.
They cave, and then like it's like, oh well, the first however many. Another band that did that I loved, the House of Love.
Okay.
Do you remember the House of Love? Oh, I'm gonna do a backtracking season on the House of Love. They were one of my favorite bands, like late high school, college, whatever. But they did the self-titled album thing for like 2 or 3, and then it was like suddenly the albums had titles, and it felt like you wimped out.
Yeah. It is interesting. I can't think of a band that was able to stick with it, but there definitely have been musicians and bands that have tried it. Peter Gabriel, I think, did it for 4 albums post Genesis, and then he did So, I think, was his first album with an official album title.
So he caved. He wimped out.
He caved. I think that was his first one with an official title. Red House Painters definitely did a couple.
Grow a spine. Well, Gabriel.
I know. Maybe you're too busy listening to world music, or organizing the WOMAD Festival. If you remember the WOMAD Festival, World of Music and Dance.
I do remember.
Yeah, I never went to the WOMAD Festival. It was a little too much. Kind of, it kind of went into the cafe jam, the coffee house jam genre a bit too much for me.
Right. Coffee house jam music was huge in the 90s.
It was. We've covered it extensively, I feel like, in this season of Backtracking. Okay, so enough of this bullshit. enough of this bullshit. Let's get back to Lovers Leap USA. We have gotten through roughly half of the tracks on this album. It is time to listen to track 7, 5 minutes and 55 seconds. It's called
But if you'll remember, we already covered the first half of it last episode. We have to. I'm kidding. Go ahead. We didn't cover it at all. We had a debate. Hey, go listen to the last episode if you need to pick up on that joke.
Go back, rewind it. You'll figure out where that joke originated. All right. Until then, Pay It Back. 5 minutes and 50 seconds. Let's go. Okay, Pay It Back, J. William Hall. Now, extremely disconcerting, very slowcore, but an extremely kind of disorienting, disconcerting, highly atmospheric, but I'm going to go so far as to say pretty darn creepy, actually, song. Why don't we dig into the lyrics, and then we'll move on to the music.
Lyrically, a very dark song. This is
very dark.
This is sort of like the bottoming out mood wise. It's grim. A key lyric that I pulled out of here was, "Yes, I still love you, but I don't want you back. Whatever it is I owe you, I'll pay it back. I'll pay it back." That's a pretty grim, raw kind of thing to feel about somebody. Complicated. And, it leads me to wonder if this is another Kathleen song.
Yeah, it certainly could be. I will say that I would agree. These lyrics are about as dark as they get. I would say that they're slightly less dark than If I Had a Gun, but they're not too much less dark. But some really interesting turns of phrase in this one that I like personally. One of my favorites is in that is stanza 3, verse 3, stanza 3. I don't know how you want to describe it, but it's kind of the third section. Dreamless nights long and sour, souls drained of candle power. I like that because it is such a surprising use of the term candle power, which of course is like feet. It is an actual measure of the brightness of light. Something is like, 10,000 candle power or something. That's like the metric they use. And so, when you think about it, though, it's like souls drained of light is something you might hear in another song from another songwriter. But souls drained of candle power, I think, is one of these unexpected but clear descriptive turns of phrase that you're going to get from Eitzel that I think is lovely and surprising, but hits, perfectly descriptive. I don't know. I thought that was kind of a fun little section.
Yeah, there's some really good lyrics, really good lines in this. It's clearly somebody who, it's a angry song towards an ex-lover or an ex-love anyway. The tempo is slow. This is
very slow. Yeah. Dirgy. This is about as dirgy as any of the songs on the album, I would say.
Yeah, this is a dirge, but it's also got a little bit of the back, in the background, you hear these sort of cinematic little string snatches of sound, and it's like a loop, so it feels sort of meditative, but it's a dark meditation. Like,
it's dark. Yeah, it's dark. But I do think it's it's another one of these, if we are kind of going to go with the theory that there is this set of kind of Kath and Eitzel the aborted Kath and Eitzel project that a bunch of these songs came from. This definitely feels like it's probably part of that same, it feels very much a piece of the other ones that we've talked about that kind of sit in there, both tonally and the instrumentation and the production, right? I mean, the tone of the songs that we've kind of heard that presumably are from that project are all quite slowcore, quite dark, very, yeah, interesting. And so much different than really anything Eitzel has done since the end of AMC, right? I mean, and even if you go back into the AMC catalog, this is not going to be a perfect, there are going to be exceptions to this, but I'm going to say generally they kind of moved away from the very, very atmospheric, dirgy, slowcore stuff once they got to Mercury, certainly, right? I mean, I just don't think
for the most part. I mean, there were still elements, but they of course were trying, they were trying on commercial sounds and pushing things in those kind of directions as well. Whereas these ones with Caffin feel very much like, like an art project. They feel very much like you're building kind of a soundscape and kind of reciting poetry over it versus like verse, chorus, bridge, guitar solo, whatever, so, they hang together though. Like the mood is fairly sustained, they all feel meditative, interior in your head, kind of dark, but, I sort of wish that there was like an official, whatever this project was, like, an official EP or whatever that was just like, this was the soundtrack for the project.
Yeah, I would agree. I would agree. I think that there is, it is enticing to think about what that album might have sounded like. Certainly not going to be a laugh a minute, but I think it would be a really interesting record. Now, should we move on? The next song on here is Leave Her Alone. It's 5 minutes and 20 seconds.
Let's do it.
Okay. Leave Her Alone. 5 minutes, 20 seconds. Let's go.
Because it's so important for your pride. Your God's little soldier, making sure his thunderbolts get thrown. Why don't you? Why don't you leave my sister alone?
Okay, so the first thing I want to ask you, Jay William, and I don't know this, but I am certain that this song, that I have heard a different version of this song somewhere, but I couldn't quite figure out where that might have been because I'm not aware of this having shown up on any other B-side collection, and I know that I have never heard this album before our preparation for this podcast. Maybe you can help me with that. Did this show up someplace else that I would have heard it?
Not that I'm aware of, unless you heard it. I mean, you saw AMC live, right? Sometime after this. Is it possible that they performed it?
It's certainly possible. I'm not sure. I'm not sure whether this really made it into the, AMC reunion set lists at all, but that is possible. In any case, it may just be that it sounded so familiar to me because I actually think of the songs on this record, it is kind of the catchiest, in some ways the poppiest song on the album. It feels the most fully formed to me. It feels the most, maybe not the most, but it is very fairly traditionally structured, certainly compared to the other songs on this record.
Yeah, it definitely evoked latter era AMC albums like, Mercury, or probably even more like San Francisco. Like there was something about the instrumentation on this one that felt akin to that, more of like a pop style songwriting. It's got the full band. The one element that I thought was a little puzzling, and again, but this is what this is. These are rough mixes. These are things that were not quite finished. And there's this wah wah kind of guitar that's just sort of like kind of prominently mixed, like running throughout. And I question.
Yeah, there's I was that a wah wah? I thought that I just assumed that was a keyboard. But
it could be a keyboard. Yeah.
It's interesting that you said that. I found it strange. And my first reaction was like, gosh, it's been a long time since I remember there being, I guess probably since Mercury, where there was really like prominent keyboard work, although that might not be right. There might be some on 60 watt. But in any case, I was surprised by it, but I decided I really liked it. And I'm not entirely sure why. It just gave the song a slightly different complexion. But under kind of like aside from that, it's like a very accessible song. It's a light, very kind of country feel to me, right? Like, I don't know. I just found this song to be a real delight, but it has these very interesting, direct, memorable, and I think easy to interpret lyrics, at least superficially easy to interpret, that again, I really appreciated. And why don't we talk about the lyrics before I go on about the song more generally?
Well,
so
I can tell you I've got the body book here.
Okay.
And it says specifically, this song was a protest against Eitzel's sister's treatment by her right-wing brother-in-law, partly an attack on the anti-abortionist lobby, America's so-called moral majority, and partly a tribute to Renee, his sister. It was also Eitzel's first foray into political songwriting. So basically, she must have been having an issue with, a right wing or, someone on the opposite end of the political spectrum. And Eitzel, this was directed at that individual.
Yeah. Yeah. And that like comes through very clearly. It is maybe as on the nose as an Eitzel song to date in the entire category. In that it really doesn't need a lot of, you don't need to puzzle over any of these lines. That being said, I think that many of the lines are real, although direct, they're very, they don't lose the artfulness, right? He still has this like, you're like a sparrow who missed its migration home and you're hollow to the bone. Like, I love those, it's clear what he's saying, right? But he does it in a really kind of artful and pretty way. I love the connection of sparrow and a migration and then hollow to the bone. Of course, I believe that birds have hollow bones as well. So it like connects the lines there. I don't know. I mean, I just think there's some real nice turns of phrase in here. I'm not certain that I just, I like this one. I like this one.
I like it as well. I think it's got some really, just powerful lines about religious hypocrisy. Like, not to get too deep into the politics of it or whatever, but like, I'm on Mark's side on this one. And so I feel like, he's calling out things like, you believe in evil as long as it's not yours. You believe that love is something you own. You know, like these very direct, accusatory, but like demonstrably true, sort of statements that, I think the whole effect of it is really powerful. And once again, this is a song where you see Eitzel going to bat for a woman that he loves.
Yeah. 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 Although my understanding from the Sean Body book is he and his sister didn't always have a particularly close relationship, but later on in life, which certainly the era of this song would reflect, apparently they did grow much, much closer. And I do think this is like a really quite lovely gesture by him on behalf of his sister.
Yeah, it says in the book after that part that I read that like they had gotten closer as they got older. They were aligned politically, and that kind of like, you know, gave them something to kind of bond over. And yeah, I mean, I think it is. It's a brother sticking up for his sister. Like that's
Yeah.
a beautiful thing.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. But I also just think all of that aside, that sentiment aside, it's just a really pretty song. You know, the instrumentation choices I think are a little they're unusual in the same way that some of the preceding songs have been unusual, but I do wonder whether your thought was that this was one of the tracks that was done during that Kath and Eitzel project or not. To me, it did not seem obviously a piece of those other songs.
Yeah, I would think that this has a different source. Yeah, I don't think it was but it is a full band song. So I don't know
Yeah.
who he was doing these demos with or whatever, but you know, it's a little more fleshed out than just like a rough demo.
Yeah, and I think that, you know, in some ways it kind of gets back to, I guess maybe Dream in Your Heart. I wonder if it was the same sessions as that. Unclear, obviously. I don't know that we're gonna know, but it doesn't feel fully formed to me. It doesn't feel totally completed. But I'll make the argument that I think this one is about as close to fully completed of the full band songs on this album as we have.
I would agree. Yeah, I mean, it was completed to the point that they had developed a full band arrangement for it.
Yeah. All right. So should we go ahead and move on to Steve? I Always Knew.
Yep.
Okay, there it is. 5 minutes and 25 seconds. Track 9. Let's go.
They boiled the night into a thin white line, ringing doorbells and waiting next to a payphone. I guess all this means is we're gonna sleep together. Outside I'm the heart as a brick, inside I'm like a feather.
Okay, J. William Hall, are you ready to dig into Steve I Always Knew?
Let's get in there.
Okay,
So
who
let
is Steve?
Let me start
Tell
by
me.
saying,
Tell me about Steve. Who is this Steve?
well, all I can tell you, Steven, he is named in the Sean Body book. It says Steve, the song, was Eitzel's only gender-specific love song to a man. It begins with a night of sex and crystal meth and goes on to document a long relationship's decline. That's what the book has to say about the song. I don't know whether that is true in all details, but the impression I got was that this was a song about a hookup with a guy named Steve.
Yeah, it definitely struck me as kind of the most like obviously out song of Eitzel's catalog to date. There certainly were a lot of these songs where, you know, as we've covered the other albums, there was speculation by reviewers that maybe this was, you know, his like kind of coming out song or whatever. But I think a lot of that really felt to me like kind of gambits that various music writers were making. I'm sure we made some gambits like that in our interpretation as well.
No gambits.
No.
This is a no gambit zone.
It's a no gambit zone. But this one obviously, again, you don't need to do a lot of interpretation to figure out what's going on here with Steve. But it is a very dark kind of picture of this relationship. And I guess my feeling on here is there certainly have been some songs, some what I would consider Eitzel relationship songs, where there's kind of like mixed feelings, if that makes sense, or there's this sense of impending doom, or he looks back at a relationship with some cynicism or bitterness. This is a song that really felt to me like it was full of enmity for this person without a lot of like backing off of that. I just didn't get a lot like any warmth toward this Steve at all. Did you?
No, I would agree. This seems there's something very cold about the perspective of this song. This is not a person, with like, I still love you, but whatever. Like this seems very just kind of like, harsh judgment.
Yeah, it really,
person. Yeah.
It is like looking back on a relationship of some kind with absolutely no positive memories. You know what I mean? Like it really is. I just kind of feel like they're, Southend on Sea or something. There seems to be a little bit more of like, maybe it wasn't great or this was not a great moment, but somehow or another it felt more like, I don't know. Like you could sense that there was some warmth there at some point. And this one, I just kind of, as you go through the song, you're just like, fuck, like, he was with this guy, but it really seemed like he never liked this guy at all. And he still really doesn't like him now. It's really a very opposite of a love song.
Yes, contemptuous.
Very deeply contemptuous song.
I'm just going to go ahead and say this was not one of my favorites on this collection, but I did catch on one of the upcoming albums, I believe there is a new version of this song. Like this is one of the few songs from Lover's Leap that gets remade or re-recorded and added somewhere else. So we have that to look forward to.
We do, and I think it's interesting that this would be a song that they would pull off of this, because I would agree. I don't think this is one of the best songs in the album, but I actually didn't. I would rank this in the top 25% of the songs on this album. I think although I found it to be a little cold, I liked the music. I liked the atmosphere. I like the tone. I like the atmospherics. I found it. I actually found the, somewhat well articulated chorus structure of the song to be nice. One thing I've definitely learned over the course of backtracking this American Music Club and digging into these songs, I really have, I think, it's impossible for me to ignore the fact that I have a strong preference for Eitzel's songs when they're more traditionally structured. And I think I need that. I think I need that structure to feel like there's momentum through the song, if that makes sense. Like I like to feel in some weird way where I am in the duration of the song. Am I getting close to the end? Am I still at the beginning? And I think the choruses and stuff like that, the more traditional structure kind of helps you feel that way. And I think sometimes when they're a little bit more formless, I can feel like the songs just go on a really long time. And even if that's not necessarily the case.
Well, this one, it is the case. This is over 5 minutes. This is a 5-minute, 25-second song. So I do think this one maybe overstays its welcome a bit. I suspect this might be part of the Caffin project because it has that kind of like
It
similar
does.
bed of the background jazzy sound effects kind of, and I think that it's a really cool atmosphere that they're building, you know, with that group of songs. So
Yeah.
you know, that could have been something. It could have been
Yeah.
something. It could have been a contender.
Yeah. All right. Well, it sounds like you're ready to move on to Nice, Nice, Nice.
I am indeed.
Okay. Okay, good. I was that pause there. I wasn't sure whether you were actually ready, but you had to steel yourself, and now you're ready to move on to Nice, Nice, Nice. Nice, Nice,
Right,
Nice.
I had a big gulp.
Okay. Every time you listen to Nice, 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 it is 4 minutes and 19 seconds long. Never varies. It is 4 minutes and 19 seconds every single time.
Unless
We are
you're
gonna
listening on double speed.
which I would not recommend for the music, honestly. All right, let's go ahead and give it a listen right now.
This is your line of demarcation, beyond which you won't move or see. This is the line that pulls midnight behind it, that won't let you out or let you be.
Okay, Jay William. Now, if you want to kind of adhere to the Sean Body articulation of this album, where you brought or the sessions with Caffin, the Portishead thing, if you
Yeah.
want to adhere to that, I think there's no better example of that than this song.
Yeah, I would agree. This is like a looped, you know, yeah, you're doing like you're finding a sample of something that you're looping in the background, and this has got a vaguely hip hop-ish kind of like looped drum beat that's
Yes.
sort of like keeping the background steady.
Yeah.
Yeah, like I mean, you know, Portishead or like this one, even I was thinking of a band like Soul Coughing. You know,
Oh.
there were like those groups that had this sort of like
Yeah, no.
loop jazz.
I'm gonna get so really I think what this one reminded me of, Tricky. I don't know if you have ever heard Tricky.
I remember Tricky from Is Tricky still doing his thing? Is he still
I have no idea, but you know, Massive Attack, Tricky, Portishead.
Yeah.
I believe they were all from one part of England. I can't remember what. Maybe was it Manchester? Might not have been Manchester, but there was like a
Bristol?
it would maybe Bristol, but it was a sound. There's trip hop, right? Trip hop was what they
Yes.
were calling it. Yeah, and yeah, I just when I listened to this, I was like, oh man, it would totally be contemporaneous to this. I remember that. So this he released in '97. I think that I went to go see Tricky live in maybe '98 or something.
Okay.
But I remember when all these bands kind of like came out, and it definitely was, at least to my ears, a very different, very interesting sound that I hadn't heard before, and I personally appreciated. Not, didn't fall in love with, but I liked it. And this song definitely feels to me like, somebody found a Massive Attack album and wanted to noodle around with that a little bit.
Oh yeah. So Eitzel says in the body book, he says he's talking about the Caffin project. He says it's something I'm doing without any expectations of anyone having it. It's on a sampler, so it's sampled stuff, but I don't want to do another Portishead thing. There's enough fucking Portishead ripoffs already. And then it says the project sampled a famous soundtrack of space music, but Eitzel will not say which one for fear of having to pay up.
That's
So that
really
may be
funny.
why they shelved it, because they had sampled something that they were like, if we put this out there, like we're not going to get the rights to it or whatever. But, it's a shame. I would say that lyrically, this one for me slots into This seems like another kind of takedown song. Like he's mad about somebody. He's sort of, he's saying that they're very nice, but it sounds like it's like surfacey. He says, "You're so nice, you're cold as ice." So it's like they're nice, but they're frosty. And the verses kind of talk about it seems like a vaguely Hollywood-ish kind of setting, celebrity or actress, or I don't know.
Yeah. I it is if there's definitely a number of songs on this record that the bitterness meter is pretty high. And I do wonder, kind of in terms of the songwriting, and the lyric writing, when all of these happen, because I don't want to kind of like speculate too much about his mood and everything, but it did feel to me like with 60 Watt and West, maybe West was just purely the influence of what's his name from REM.
Oh yeah, that guy from REM.
Yeah, fucking REM boy over there, guitarman. What's his name?
Petey Buck.
Yeah. I mean, it may have just been Peter Buck's influence on the album, but it felt to me like kind of post AMC. Really, even in San Francisco, there was a substantial lightening in what I perceive to be Eitzel's mood, but certainly the creative output that shows up on these albums. And I wouldn't necessarily even say that there are some very dark moments, obviously, on Caught in a Trap. We've already talked about,
right.
Like If I Had a Gun, there's some very dark moments. But I wouldn't even say that album feels kind of exceedingly bitter to me. But a few of the songs on this one feel there's like a real bitterness to it that I don't think is present in the earlier catalog as much.
Well, I mean, I have to wonder just, it's the difference of, you're working on songs that are going to be on an album and you have a pool of 30 or 50. And you're whittling them out for one reason or another. And I think probably the type of songs where the songwriter is just angry at somebody and is just kind of, letting them have it. That's probably not as compelling, to other people in the band. And so like, I wonder if there were times where people were like, like, I don't want to do this song that's just like this kind of, personal, like, I, the songwriter, am angry at this specific person and I'm going to rant about it. And, the other members of the band maybe don't feel like, like that feels like, I don't know, just too personal or something. And so, but on something like this, Eitzel, the accusation, I think, or the stereotype about him was that, oh, he's depressed and why doesn't he just cheer up and sing about something happy or whatever, especially like the early AMC, like the grimness of a lot of the songs. But, I mean, I think that came naturally, like, this is evidence that like he was still writing those songs. Like, this is a diary entry, essentially, like where you're kind of going off on somebody that you're mad at or frustrated with or whatever. And, but you wouldn't necessarily be like, I'm going to put this on my major label debut album. Because
all right, fair.
It's too public or too personal, for an audience to really connect with, on an emotional level. But having said that, certainly, you read these lyrics and you think like this is a personal song about something that happened. But like, I mean, you live long enough and you have enough people, that you get very angry with over the course of a lifetime. And so there is something like that you can sort of connect with, but, clearly this one, this one was personal.
Yeah. All right. Well, is there anything else we want to say about this? I just found this one from a musical perspective to be pretty interesting, actually, and probably the most far afield from what we've heard from Eitzel previously of any of the rest of the songs, at least from a kind of instrumentation and production perspective. So in that way, I do think it's interesting and worth a listen. I also, it makes me additionally curious and full of anticipation about some of the stuff we're going to cover later in the season that I haven't heard yet. Like, for example, the album that he does with a Greek band. I can't remember which one. It might be, is it Hey Mr. Ferryman? I'm not sure which one it is, but
I'm not sure.
Yeah, but there apparently is one, and it should be interesting to kind of dig into those, especially after seeing all the different directions he was kind of thinking about at this point in the career.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so it is time to talk about Your Glass Jaw, Jay William.
My glass jaw?
Yes, Your Glass Jaw. We are going to think about it while we listen to Your Glass Jaw. 6 minutes and 9 seconds. That is a certified epic. Let's listen. Okay, this, Jay William, is Your Glass Jaw. Now, we can talk about the lyrics. We can talk about the music. We can talk about that, what seems to me clearly Caffin Eitzel production. Where do you want to start?
I want to start with Caffin. This clearly is a Caffin Eitzel thing. It's got that same kind of like they've built a bed of music and he's kind of singing over top of it. It feels slightly jazzy, but like in a slowcore kind of like atmosphere sort of way. I wouldn't say it feels so far removed from 60 Watt, in the same way that some other songs on this collection are like that. But it's got like a tension to it.
Yes.
The one little element that I noticed every time it did it was like this, like every now and again there'd be this conga roll where you'd be like, just like in the background, and it creates this very cinematic kind of thing. Now, what is he singing about here? I have no idea, and my gut tells me that this was sort of improvised-ish lyrics because they don't feel fully formed. Even on the Genius page with the lyrics, like there's question marks on this, and dissolve bright eyes, dissolve into your glass jaw. I don't know what that means. Yeah, strange. But it very difficult to interpret these lyrics, but I will say some interesting kind of cool lines. The patience of gods and gamblers. Kind of a neat little line there. But yeah, overall, strange lines. I would say that the tension that you identified was kind of the most marked thing for me. It's interesting. I found it interesting that you compared it to 60 Watt because while I do understand that in some ways, I feel like 60 Watt probably the one of the adjectives I'd use most readily for 60 Watt that I don't think I'd use for any AMC album is breezy. 60 Watt has this, although sometimes the songs are a little heavy, it really does have this kind of Chet Baker breeziness, right? Like it just feels kind of loose and relaxed, and this song feels anything but that. It feels coiled to me. That just doesn't ever really release in a way that I actually kind of like. But I just found this song to be a little disconcerting musically. Not lyrically, I thought it was, we already talked about that. But musically, I found it, disconcerting. Yeah, I mean, I guess you are right. Like 60 Watt does have a breeziness to it that this is not about breeziness. This is tension. And, I think instrumentally it feels
Yeah.
similar because it's got this jazzy sort of instrument
Yeah.
palette. But I mean, this is clearly part of the Caffin thing,
For sure.
And it was this like trip hop, slowcore, Americana kind of combo that I do, it's like, I'm kind of like, yeah, that's kind of intriguing. Like I can't think of, other groups that have that group of ingredients in them. Exactly. So I think it's a really cool piece. I mean, it's 6 minutes, like that's, that is an epic, but I don't feel like this one overstays its welcome. Like on some of the earlier ones, that were, less developed or whatever, and it felt like they got a little monotonous. But this one kind of, I enjoyed it for the full run of the song.
Yeah, I would agree. I think that at this point, I think I feel pretty comfortable saying that whatever that abortive Caffin Eitzel record was, I really do wish it would have seen the light of day. And if you were to strip a few of these tracks out that feel like they're probably not part of that project, I think you would end up with something that was not dissimilar to Everclear. I don't want to say it's similar to Everclear, but you would be able to connect those two pretty logically. Like you'd be able to see that progression. And as I've said before, Everclear is like, definitely, if it is not definitely my favorite American, we'll find this out in the season finale when we do our Tournament of Champions. But I would say that if I had to pick right now, Everclear would be my favorite AMC album. There is a whole AMC catalog that like just sticks within the Caffin produced world that I would like to hear in some alternate reality.
You would like to hear a follow-up to Everclear built on the Everclear sound.
I actually
in
would
an
like
alternate
to
reality.
In an alternate reality, I would like to hear the rest of the AMC catalog if it were produced by Eitzel and Caffin.
See, but here's the question. For,
okay.
Like at what point does a production team, a production style, like the same people, like when do they start repeating themselves? When does it start to feel like there's no more blood in the stone, like I mean, I think there's no answer to that unless,
5 albums
actually would stick together or whatever, but
5 albums. The answer is 5 albums.
5 albums. That's where you've got your 5 and that's it.
That is the rule. It's like gravity.
Okay.
No,
okay.
I see what you're saying. I just kind of feel like, and I've said it before, I felt like the Caffin production work on Everclear, whatever happened, I don't really know what really happened behind the scenes, but something happened on Everclear that I think was remarkable, not just in the songwriting, because I think the songwriting is, similarly great on the preceding and following albums, but there's something about the sound that really coalesced on Everclear, and I hear something that feels like a descendant of that in these tracks, and it just, again, kind of further makes me feel like, gosh, there was, there's a slightly different AMC catalog out there somewhere in another reality that I would have loved to have heard.
Right. Well, maybe someday they'll release the Caffin tapes.
Well,
locked in the vault.
If there's anybody out there who's like one of the, like an AI guy that knows how to do the musical AI stuff, I'm sure you've heard all these AI, they ask an AI to make
A1.
A1, yes. Yeah. A1. It is a delicious, delicious condiment.
The good old A1. They can't figure out what the formula is because the herbs and spices, it's too complicated.
I believe there are 21. Isn't that what they say about A1? There are 21 different ingredients.
Oh, I didn't know that. You have insider info.
I might be making that up. There might actually be a different 21 ingredient condiment that I'm thinking of, but anyway, we can backtrack A1 in a future season. So why don't we move on to What Good Is Love? This is the penultimate song. Now, dropping way down to 2 minutes and 38 seconds. So why don't we just dive right into that gem?
All my chicken bone dreams left on a windowsill too long. It's easy to pull them apart, easy to make them come undone.
What Good Is Love, J. William Hall. Very different tone. Why don't you tackle it?
I don't have the answer to the question. Mark Eitzel does not have the answer to the question. He merely poses the question in a memorable chorus. If there's no way to love,
yes,
the one that I love, then what good is love? What good is love? This is a simple but kind of powerful statement, and I feel like this is one of the most fully realized songs on this collection. I think it's a hidden gem.
Yeah.
It's beautifully simple, just guitar and voice. It almost sounds like a voice memo kind of thing. But it's got some great lyrics and a really beautiful structure and lovely performance.
Yeah, I think that this is such an interesting palate cleanser after the last track, right? Like, you really, in the middle of this album, there are some great songs that I love on it, right? But really, kind of, once you hit track 5, you could argue earlier than that, but like, it gets kind of, dirgy, foggy, like dark. It just ends up being an album of a certain kind of heaviness, emotional heaviness that is rough. And I love that even on this kind of track or this collection of, B-sides, oddities, demos, his sequencing is interesting. He gives you this palate cleanser, and then the next song, which we're going to talk about as a palate cleanser, I'm going to talk about as a palate cleanser, that I think are really great. It's like he does all this kind of weird, dark, heavy stuff, but then, reminds you of something at the end of it, and kind of releases you a little bit from that feeling at the end of the album, which I just think it doesn't feel tossed off to me, right? Like the cover and the liner notes and stuff maybe make it seem like he put a little less thinking into this than maybe he did. But to me, the fact that these 2 songs are the last 2 songs on the record tell me he maybe put a little bit more into it than he's representing in the liner notes.
Yeah, he finishes strong, and these are, the last 2 songs are probably the most kind of like crafted, of the songs on this collection. And what he shows, I think, like following this, it's not just a palate cleanser, but it is a reminder of the breadth of his songwriting. He writes all different kind of moods of song, and he can get very dark and very sad, but there's beauty, like woven in there as well. And I think that's what this song is. It's just a lovely, beautiful song.
Yeah, I would agree. I think this is just like a perfect little gem. Unexpected. I actually think one of the things that's interesting is it's unexpected, and after Your Glass Jaw, like you hear that click track come in or whatever that is. It just sounds like a click track basically. And then the guitar comes in, and it just somehow immediately, before you even get past like a single chord in the song, it feels lighter. Somehow it just feels lighter. You feel like something's been taken off your chest in this one. And it isn't as though the lyrics to this one are like super positive or anything, but it just is lighter emotionally, I think, than everything that's come before it. And I don't know, I think it's a really nice turn for this record.
Yeah, it doesn't feel as heavy. I like the visual of the all my chicken bone dreams.
Yeah.
Left on a windowsill too long, easy to pull them apart, easy to make them come undone. And then he returns to the chicken bone dreams later. Like there's something just kind of I don't know, like small but like powerful about it. And I think it's a great song. I think it's a lost gem.
Is it lost? So this song actually appears again on a later Eitzel album. I think it's worth mentioning. So we are going to see this one when we cover The Ugly American.
Yes.
Okay, so do you want to move on to the last track, which of course we have heard before. We covered in I guess 2 weeks ago, we covered this in the episode. It is Smog Seahorse. Why don't we just give it a listen?
Hands in pockets, eyes screwed shut, let it all go. Hands in pockets, eyes screwed shut, let it all go. No address book, you're lost in the sky.
Okay, Jay William. Smog Seahorse. I don't think we need to go over the lyrics again. We've already identified that there is a Joanna Newsom-y approach to at least the title here.
It's got a touch. It's got a touch of twee. It's got a touch of the twee.
A touch of twee. You know, I was thinking about twee and your use of twee as a description for music, and specifically in relation to Joanna Newsom. When I think of, if you were to say to me, what is an extremely twee band? You know who I'd mention?
I know who you're going to say.
Who?
Belle and Sebastian. That's who you're
You know
say.
what? That is exactly right. How did you know I was going to say that? If I had to say, they're the most twee band I can think of. Great. Well, listen, I love Belle and Sebastian. I've seen them live multiple times, but
I'm glad we made this connection, because in the Sean Body book, right around this era, Eitzel was into Belle and Sebastian.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah.
Because they talk about a thing where he's at a Belle and Sebastian show and he really likes them. So
he sees, you know who he sees at the show, if you remember from that anecdote.
Yes, it's former AMC producer Joe Ciccarelli.
Joe Ciccarelli. Yeah. Yes. And Eitzel makes a joke saying, "Don't fuck up Belle and Sebastian," within the context of he was going to produce them or something.
Or he was interested in that or something. Yeah. And he was like, "Don't fuck them up." Yeah. Anyway, it's a funny anecdote.
It is.
But, did Eitzel catch a whiff of the twee and he put it into this song?
No, I don't think so. I think that your conspiracy theory spinning has gone way too far, and it's time for me to intervene. No, Smog Seahorse. So listen, we've talked about this before. I think this version is nearly as lovely as the version that appears on Caught in a Trap. It is also, in terms of like the actual recording, nearly identical. I would say that it is slightly less cleanly produced, and there is one musical figure that appears in here that is not included in the version that's on Caught in a Trap. It's like a hint of a bridge or something. I don't know a better way to describe it, but it's not sung. There's no lyrics. It's just a guitar section, and I heard it, and I could be wrong, but I'm fairly certain I'm correct. It just didn't appear in the version on Caught in a Trap. And it could just be sequencing, right? It could be the fact that we covered Caught in a Trap before we covered this. Could be that I knew, I was familiar with Caught in a Trap and I wasn't familiar with this. But I very much felt as though the Caught in a Trap version was the kind of quote unquote definitive version. But I think this is a very, very similar version of the song.
Yeah, my impression was that this was basically the demo that the Caught in the Trap version was based on, like when they recorded that one and they did it a little cleaner or whatever. But yeah, I mean, it's musically, lyrically very, very similar to that one, so I don't think we need to belabor it.
Okay, then we're not going to belabor it. What we are going to belabor is one thing, J. William Hall. Just one thing.
Yeah.
We need for you to determine the best song and the worst song on this collection of songs.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not going to call it an album.
Yeah, a collection, I think, is appropriate.
It's a collection. Okay. So, but that's not good. Just because it's a collection and not an official album doesn't mean you're going to get away from this challenge that you need to undertake.
I don't run from adversity. I run towards adversity.
Right. That's right.
And I'm going to take this challenge on head on.
You are a first responder of musical conundrums. You are the proverbial man running into the flaming building, not running out. Except in this case, it is not a literal flaming building because you would not, in fact, run into a literal flaming building. You would run away from a literal flaming building. But if it were an album of flaming building, you would do it. You would run into it. Is that a fair thing to say?
If there were a literal flaming building,
yeah,
and say, heaven forbid, one of my children were trapped in that building, I would run into the flames to attempt to save them. Even if it wasn't one of my children, it was a child, I like to believe, faced with that situation, I would run into the flaming building to try to save the person. Certainly, I would, in a situation in which I had to choose the worst song and the best song on an album, I'm not going to blink. I'm not going to walk away from that challenge. I'm going to face it head on. And here's what I have to say about Lovers Leap USA. The best song on this collection is the penultimate track.
Wow.
What Good Is Love? It's got there's something about the lyrics on this that feel universal. It feels like this is a slightly higher caliber of songwriting versus, as much as I enjoy this collection of songs, like we discussed, much of it feels a little like not quite done, and but this is a song that I think is lovely, and I'm excited to hear the version that crops up a few albums from now.
Yeah. Well, listen, I respect that choice, and thank you for your service. I am not normally, I feel comfortable just telling you that you're wrong or not. I'm not going to do that this time because I actually kind of buy into your argument, and I don't disagree with it. I am going to select a different song as the best song on the album for reasons that are difficult for me to articulate. But in my opinion, on this album, the best track is Leave Her Alone. I'm not entirely sure why. I don't think it is as fully formed as What Good Is Love or Smog Seahorse. And I don't even know that I like it as well as those two songs, for example. But there's something compelling about that track that's difficult for me to articulate, both in the instrumentation, like everything about it was the song that I kind of couldn't get out of my head after listening to it, 4 or 5 times. I listened to this this album a couple of times while I was in the gym on the elliptical this morning, rocking out, wearing leg warmers and a headband.
Getting swole.
Yeah.
Are you getting swole?
Yeah. But I will tell you what, that's the song that I remembered. Now, it's time to pick the worst song on the album.
This one, I think, was more challenging for me. I didn't have one that stood out as the obvious least favorite of the litter. But if I'm forced at gunpoint, this is a life or death situation.
Yeah.
I'm going to say the song that was the worst song on this album is Steve I Always Knew.
Interesting.
I accept, and I'm interested to hear the version that crops up of this song on a subsequent album.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, well, I think that's definitely the wrong choice.
Oh.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the wrong choice. I mean, listen, I think there are criticisms you could make about most of the songs on this album. I think that there are criticisms you could make about Steve I Always Knew. It is not the worst song on this album. I think in this case, you kind of have to take Eitzel and his own assessment at face value. I have to agree that the worst song on this album is the opener, Have No Word. It is not, it's just not there. It's just not, it is at best a sketch of a song that might get written someday. It's not enough there's not enough there. It's just not, there isn't really a hook that's memorable. I don't think lyrically it's interesting. It really just feels like some, it feels like he's working some stuff out, which I appreciate that he included on the album. I think it's interesting to hear. It's, for the super fan, it's a real kind of glimpse inside of his process, but that doesn't change the fact that this is not ready for prime time.
I'm not going to argue too hard with you. I'm glad that, you started at rock bottom and then the album got better from there.
Yeah, I think that's right.
I'm happy for your journey. I recognize that it is not my journey.
Yeah.
We do not live in a black and white world. We live in a world of gray.
Well, I think it is time for us to, speaking of journey into the point of the podcast where we tell people we just tell them how to get in touch with us.
There are several ways.
There are several ways. There's email ways, there's Instagram ways, there's Twitter ways, there's Reddit ways. All of them involve Backtracking Rocks ROX. So go use all of them.
Now, the other thing you can do is you can go onto the podcast platforms and you can rate us, you can comment, but the deal is only 5 stars, right? Out of 5.
Yeah, that is right. We need to overcome whatever negative impact that fucker Michael had on us with his nasty comment.
The algorithm is ruined. It's ruined, I tell you.
Coward that he is. He just, only used his first name, didn't say anything useful. That fucker.
It's only one of the most common first names in the English-speaking world.
Yeah. Hey, tough guy, why don't you just, tell us your last name? All right, so listen, we are going to be back. We are going to be back next week. We're going to be taking on what? Honestly, I don't know. I don't know what the next record is in the sequence that we need to cover.
It requires research. It requires dedication. It requires hours and hours of your precious time and energy to figure this out.
Yeah, it's gonna either be love songs for patriots, or it's gonna be Super Hits International, or what is it gonna be? What else could it be? I don't even know.
I think there's an album called The Invisible Man that, by my recollection, is the next in the sequence.
Well, if that's what it is, then that's what it'll be, and we will cover it. But until that point, you're going to have to wait. So, Jay William, As always, thank you for your participation, your hard work, and your diligence.
I take this role seriously, and I always strive to do my best.
Well, you have done that today, so congratulations to you and your family. Thank you, listeners. We will see you next time. Bye-bye.
Bye.